I've taken you through the analysis of the poem. We really worked that poem to death, and I'm really happy with the work that we did there, because as I told you, the more work that you do analyzing the poem, the more you bring to the outline and the more you bring to the essay. You're going to do this in 3 steps. You're going to analyze the poem, then you're going to organize what you found in your analysis into an outline, and then you're going to write your essay. So I'm going to show you how to put that outline together so that you can write your essay. First, what's important is I want to go over what we found in our analysis. You most likely will not have to make a list like this. It was probably redundant for you, honestly, because of the lack of time that you're going to have. But for my instructional purposes, I want to make it clear how you're going to put this outline together. And I want to review what we found in each part. The parts that I went over, part 1, the technical aspect, part 2, the bigger picture, and part 3, the meaning, we're going to use that to be the form of our body paragraphs. So for this essay, I want you to write a standard 5-paragraph outline, where you're going to have, as the first paragraph, your introduction with your thesis statement. Then you're in your second paragraph, your third paragraph, your fourth paragraph, and then your 5th paragraph will be your conclusion, where you're going to restate your thesis. Let's go over the list of what you know from part 1. In part 1, we found a lot of things, right? We found the form of the poem, that it's 8 lines. It's 1 stanza. What else did we discover? We found a lot of alliteration, and we found both assonance and consonance. What else did we find? We found a rhyme pattern. We found that the end rhymes were perfect. And by perfect, you'll remember I mean perfect rhymes. And they were heroic couplets. We also found the speaker is a first person. And we identified repetition. Now, when you're going to be placing this into your first body paragraph, because that's where it's going to go, you're not just going to list what you found, but you want to explain why what you found makes sense. First, you're going to identify everything, and you're going to associate some meaning to it. So let me explain. In this first body paragraph, you're going to explain the technical elements. You're going to use your poetry terminology. I didn't spell that right. Because you want to show that you've studied effectively in order to apply the terms that you know the instructor who's grading the exam is going to be impressed with. So you're going to use words like alliteration, not just repetition of initial sounds. When you use the proper words like assonance and consonance, the person grading your essay will know what they mean, so you do not have to restate definitions, okay? That would be a waste of time. And redundant, because you know what you mean too if you're going to use these words. So use your poetry terminology effectively to show that you apply and know how to apply what you've learned. I'm going to talk about form and say that he used an octave. We know that the poet used alliteration and repetition of sounds, and he did this throughout the whole poem. Now, what kind of sounds did he use? In the middle of the lines, he used hard consonant sounds. S and k and b and d. At the end of the lines, he used more open vowel sounds. O, a, e, and a. Almost all of the vowel sounds. So why did he do that? First of all, alliteration is used kind of like onomatopoeia in some poems. Do you remember what onomatopoeia is? It's where we mimic the sound of something and spell it out. Like bzz is B-U-Z-Z or B-Z-Z. Or hiss is H-S-S or H-I-S-S. And we do this to mimic the sound of something. Well, you know that in poetry, sound is incredibly important. I mean, poetry started as an oral tradition. Rhyme is about sound, and we like it when things sound nice. So the alliteration and the repetition of the sound, let's think about what it sounds like. If you had the poem in front of you again, you would read all of this s, 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 s in the middle. Does that sound like anything to you? Do you remember what the poem was about? Do you remember the images and the action in the poem? There was no story being told, but there was a lot of action. Now, how would a poet transfer ideas of action or movement on the page if the page doesn't actually move or make a sound? Well, he would use his words to do so. He would use alliteration to do that. So, the reason why he was using so much of the s, s, s sound is he's mimicking the cutting sound that's happening as the harvest of the weeds is happening. S, 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 s. He's mimicking the way that they're cutting. Do you remember in the first stanza, he's talking about reapers who do things so methodically that it's like second nature to them? And at the end, he opens up the sound with the vowel. A, O, A, E. Now let's take all of that sound together. S, 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 O, s, 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 E, s, 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 A. That sounds like breath. He's mimicking breath. So when you are doing the alliteration, you're going to say, alliteration used mimics the sound of the cutting and breathing of the workers and the horses in the poem. Isn't that amazing? That's how awesome poetry works. That it can all come together, that we can even hear what's happening in that picture. I mean, Jean Toomer is actually letting us hear and not just see the picture of the reapers in the fields, and the tiny field rat, a tiny field rat that's bleeding and squealing. We can hear it squeal. And we can hear the horses breathe as he moves the mower behind him. And we can hear the reapers breathe as they silently swing. Sa, 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 oh. It's a really important aspect. And you will use that to attribute meaning in part 3. So we know why he used the alliteration. Now, do you see how things went to the k, k, k sound at the end of the poem? Well, they only go there after the field rat dies in the poem, right? That's when things in the poem became harsh and cold. When the mower goes over the field rat cries out, the field rat is killed, and the mower continues going on. That lack of sentiment, that lack of sympathy or conscience even, is represented in the k, k, k sound. Because now the cutting is not s, 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 it's k, k, k. More like a machine, more cold sounding than a softer sounding breath of a human. We're getting closer to meaning now. I would put that in my part 3 when we're talking about meaning. As you assign the technical elements, when you have an epiphany or a realization, you want to put that in the meaning, okay? He's making a comparison between the breath of the workers and the horses and the coldness of the mower. Now, we already know he's making a comparison in part 3 or part 2 because we examined that. So this totally fits in with our line of thinking. Let's go to the next technical element, the end rhymes. We talked about that. So that's also going to be in your list here. We're running out of room. I'm going to write it. You're going to add it to your technical elements. And you're going to remember that in your third paragraph, your third body paragraph, excuse me. You want to also mention when you talk about the form of the poem that you recognize heroic couplets, that you recognize the octave, that it's one stanza. And you want to recognize what? Heroic couplets. Go ahead and state that you know that heroic couplets are those that have iambic pentameter. And I think that iambic pentameter, that each line has the same amount of feet, again, matches to rhythm, and it matches with the breath and the alliteration that he's giving us. So you're going to put all of your form in there. Next, what else did we discover? That he's a first-person speaker. He's giving us like a witness account of something, okay? And then the repetition. Repetition being he wants us to get the point. So we're going to put all of those ideas of technical elements. So in 2, you're going to identify what you know about the poem, all of the technical aspects. Then we're going to move to the second body paragraph. What did we learn in the big picture? We learned that 2 things are being compared. He's comparing the images. Now, this is a good point to think, why did he not separate the stanzas? He obviously had 2 very separate images, and we know that because we looked at the images ourselves. He had 2 separate images, and he kept them in one stanza. Why not separate them to make it clear? Here are the black reapers, and here are the black horses. Well, there's a reason why he didn't. He's juxtaposing them together to show us that these 2 things are not 2 separate images, but in fact, one. In your big picture body paragraph, you're going to write that. The comparison is divided into 2 images but kept as one stanza to show their relationship. As happening at once. Good. This also jives with our comparison of the breath. So everything is working together for us here. What else did we find out in the second portion? We used the imagery to make a point. There was no narrative. We have a first-person speaker. We want to use our terminology. So how would we talk about this comparison? Don't forget that we would use the word conceit. Okay? You want to impress the grader and say, I know that these are heroic couplets because they use iambic pentameter. And I know that this is a conceit because Toomer is comparing 2 unlike things, but he's showing how they are alike. And that is why he kept the stanza as 1 instead of dividing them into 2. Do you see how exciting this gets when you're able to break down a poem and understand it? Now, you've done 1 and 2. You've identified the technical aspects that you know. You're impressing the grader with all of your awesome vocabulary. Then you show him the big picture and you say, this is how it looks all together. And now the important part, meaning. Now, well, all of it's important, but you're getting to the final end. Now, I don't want you to get too caught up in thinking, what if I attach the wrong meaning to this poem? Poetry analysis, as you know, is based on lots of different theories, just like literature. So you're not going to have the same meaning as the student next to you or the other person that's taking the same exam, and that's fine. What is important is similar to any argument. You just have to prove what you are saying. So that's why it's important to put everything that you know into the essay. As long as it's here in paragraphs 1 and 2, the third body paragraph kind of just works itself out because you've already set up for yourself everything and you don't have to restate too much here. Remember, you only have 35 to 40 minutes and you're going to spend a good 10 to 15 minutes breaking down this poem to analyze it for those technical elements. So this paragraph is going to be full with a lot of listed stuff. The second paragraph is going to be more discussion about what you see as the bigger picture. And then the third paragraph, and I'm talking body paragraphs now, may not be that much. It may just say your overall opinion of what you think it means. Therefore, the larger meaning of having the images smashed together shows that Toomer, or the speaker, would like the reader to see these two things as coexisting or happening at once. But he is making a delineation between the silence in the first part of the stanza versus the noise in the second part of the stanza. So here you're going to show that it's silent versus sound. Remember the silent swinging and the squealing mouse? You're also going to show the comparison between man, who is silent, versus the animal / machine. That is in the second part. And now you're starting to also, you could take this comparison that we've made here too and restate it here because you're going to show how all of these things line up. What would you say? If I'm showing you this almost like it's an equation and I'm saying he's comparing silent versus sound, man versus animal, breath versus machine. And the sound, you have to remember, is a squealing. It's not a pleasant sound like a song. Remember, the sound was a squeal and it was a signature of death in the poem. It wasn't like a squealing of joy. So all of a sudden, these things are now cold, okay? They're cold, they're distant, they're dark, and the silence and the man and the breath is more light and warm, okay? The s, s, s versus the k, 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 okay? This is also a little bit foreboding, right? Thinking of the machine just coming and going and not stopping for blood or life or death. So you can write that down too. So in your third body paragraph, you're going to write about this. Now, you don't have to even draw out from this. If you wanted to stay here and say, the speaker is comparing the silence and breath and lightness and conscience of man and his ability to react to things warmly and with conscience versus the squealing and coldness and lack of conscience of an animal or a machine through, as evidenced through the comparisons of alliteration and imagery and motion, period, that's great. If you can go one step further and say what you think that means that he's comparing, well, let's try to pull out and say that. Can you say that maybe he's saying that man is a greater tool for man than a machine is? Maybe he's saying that man should lead over machines. Maybe he's saying that machines are too cold and that men could become cold like machines if they act like machines. Any of those ideas are fine. They really are. So long as you can point to the actual physical, technical things happening in the poem, the derived meaning that you get will not be far from the actual meaning because you're starting with facts. You're starting with stuff you know. Now, obviously, if you've done only a very little study on the poetry terminology, if you have not practiced this with a poem that you have picked out of the reading list, then this will be hard for you. You will be scrambling in your brain. You will feel like, where do I even begin? This is, I don't even know. It's like looking at a different language. So you really have to come prepared. As you can see, there's already a ton of vocabulary that you have to reference just to understand the poem. I haven't written the conclusion or introduction yet. Your thesis statement is going to be what you believe is happening in the poem. Okay? So your conclusion is going to be restating your thesis, and your thesis statement is going to be what you think the poem means. And you're only going to get there once you've done your analysis and figured out your meaning, right? After you draft your outline, then you are going to take this and you are going to start writing. You'll write your thesis first as your first paragraph. I think the poem means that the speaker is comparing the warmth and conscious and reaction and life of man compared to the coldness of machines and technology, period. Now, then you show how all of this proves that. In the conclusion, therefore, and you restate your thesis. This is a lot. It has taken us almost double the time that you're going to have for the essay portion of this exam to do all of this. But that's because this is instructional. It will not take you that much time to do it your own when you're doing the exam. But please practice this analyzing of poems. It's kind of fun for me. I don't know if it will be for you, but get into it a little bit, because wasn't it awesome to break down that poem and be able to derive meaning from it? And now you can actually understand it, which means you can appreciate it, which is why poetry is awesome. So I want you to review the way that I analyzed it, copy that way, mark up a poem physically, use similar symbols to show connections and similarities, and then use that information to plug and play into your outline, and then your essay just writes itself. You're just going to follow from your outline in order and write some beautifully crafted paragraphs. I also want you to remember to check for any spelling, punctuation, sentence errors, grammar errors. You don't want to rush so that your essay is sloppily written and then it can't be read properly, or there's a ton of spelling and sentence errors that are distracting the grader. You want it to be clean. You want your penmanship to be neat so that you can be understood and then you can get an excellent grade on this essay.